last November, John Perry told me in India that at that time there were 70 people who had registered for the anniversary from overseas. At the time I thought, I didn't realize there were that many Baba lovers from New Zealand. People from everywhere. Yeah? How many people were here in 1958? How many people? This one? And then, how many people in general, Mike? Oh, what do you think? What was the number of people attending here in 1958 when Baba was here?
I think 50.
50. Small fraction of the population. Remember Baba's remark, I come for everyone and everything, but I am for a few. He said, my lovers come to me through an experience of deep inspiration that's personal and subjective. We can't really give that conviction to anybody else. There's no persuasion, no proselytizing. We don't wear religious uniforms. There is no exclusive initiation after which one receives a spiritual costume and special name and title. To the world, it appears that there's nothing much there. And they ask, what are you getting out of this? What compels us to respond to Meher Baba's call? There are a few factors involved. It starts with disgust for the world. I don't mean the natural world. Anybody who has understood a bit of Baba's explanations develops a much greater appreciation for nature. What we mean by world and worldly are the conditions as a result of human beings in the state of reincarnation lost in materialistic self-interest. Now, Baba explains that after millions of lifetimes, bumbling through millions of lifetimes of human reincarnations, the soul begins to get fed up with this experience of oscillation between the opposites and begins to look for something deeper in life. Begins to poke into the maze, he says, that leads out of the illusion of manyness towards the truth of oneness. But even that path is very long and tedious. There are many distractions, sideshows of religious fear and promises of enlightenment through various spiritual techniques. The most insidious distractions are simple self-deception or deception by one who has developed some occult charisma, but has no real authority based upon the experience of realization of the truth. All of these ventures inevitably lead to, at best, just a deeper dead end into the maze. And what that does for us is, over the course of ages, gives us a deep discernment, a sense of simply this: not this, not this. But then what is it that makes us ultimately respond to the avatar? That important factor is past connection. It happens at first indirectly through others who had previous connections with him, and then we personally have direct connections with him. In Baba's life, we see the example of him contacting hundreds of thousands of people, most for not more than a few seconds. Establishing and reinforcing these contacts with souls is an integral part of the Avatar's work in every Advent. So he comes at different times in different places, and essentially his message is always the same whenever he is born there. God is one. We are all one. Love God. And the pattern repeats itself. After he drops his physical form, more and more people come to be inspired by him, his life, his message, come to follow him. As time goes by, those followers find it socially, politically expedient to construct a shell of external form around his teachings. It makes a more tangible thing for those followers. It makes the intellectual mind more comfortable. So the great master's original living message of oneness becomes perverted into an organized religion of rites, rituals, and ceremonies, which then asserts we have the exclusive access to God, or at least we have the best access to God. Not that we have, Baba didn't leave us without some mediums of expression. We have the dunya of Abode, we have the prayers, but these are perfect in themselves because they came from the source of truth. And Baba integrated these into his universal work and declared that they have great spiritual force for centuries to come, and that anyone who takes part in these will be helped spiritually. We like to say the Master's Prayer, the Universal Prayer. The last line of the Universal Prayer is, "You are named Izzat, the only one worthy of worship." Izzat is an ancient name of God that means the first one, the essential God soul. In the English language, Baba liked to refer to himself as the Ancient One. The most comprehensive explanation I have ever come across on this subject is from the little book, Beams on the Spiritual Panorama, from this essay, Avatar as the First Master. Now Susie is going to read from that.
In the infinite beyond state of God, which transcends the categories of consciousness as well as unconsciousness, there appeared the first initial urge for God to know himself. And with the arising of this initial urge, there was an instantaneous manifestation of infinite consciousness as well as infinite unconsciousness as simultaneous resultants. Of these two seemingly opposite but complementary aspects, the infinite consciousness plays the role of the avatar or divine incarnation. The infinite unconsciousness finds its expression through an evolution, which seeks to develop full consciousness through time processes. In the human form, the full consciousness strives to have self-knowledge and self-realization. The first man to realize God as one indivisible and eternal truth was taken up into this realization by the eternal, avataric, infinite consciousness.
Can you read that again, please?
Yes, it's very...
That last sentence.
I know, I had to read it many times. The first man to realize God as one indivisible and eternal truth was taken up into this realization by the eternal, avataric, infinite consciousness. The avatar is the first master of the God-realized soul. The avatar is the first master of the first God-realized soul. But in God-realization, the full consciousness of the first master became fused. But in God-realization, the full consciousness of the first master became fused with the eternally infinite consciousness of the avatar. Therefore, with the coming down of the first God-realized man, the avatar himself descended and took an incarnation in his body. So, from the point of view of incarnation, the avatar is the same as the first master. This first master had no master in the human form, but all subsequent masters have had masters in the human form to help them in truth realization. The first master who got fused with the eternal, avataric, infinite consciousness is the master of all masters. Yet, if and when the avatar takes an incarnation in the human form, he brings upon himself a veil. And this veil has to be removed by some master or masters. The veil with which the avatar descends in the human form is placed upon him by the 5 perfect masters who bring him down from his formless being. In the avataric periods, the 5 masters always put this veil upon the infinite consciousness of the avatar, because if he were to be brought without such a veil into the world of forms, the existing balance between reality and illusion would be profoundly disturbed.
Can you read that again? Isn't that a fascinating point? Read that one more time. This is the only place you hear this.
In the avataric periods, the 5 masters always put this veil upon the infinite consciousness of the avatar, because if he were to be brought without such a veil into the world of forms, the existing balance between reality and illusion would be profoundly disturbed. However, when the 5 masters think that the moment is right, they remove this veil which they have placed on the avataric consciousness. From that moment, the avatar consciously starts his role as the avatar. Every time the avatar descends, he is not necessarily recognized as the avatar by the masses. He can be recognized as such only by those who are very advanced spiritually. The avatar himself is the least concerned about whether or not he comes to be recognized as avatar by large numbers. He plays thoroughly his role as the avatar, and his chief work lies in the higher invisible spheres of existence. If, however, he appears at a critical or transitional cyclic period, as is often the case, he is hailed by the masses as the avatar of the age. The avatar is not necessarily recognized and hailed as the avatar by each and all, because he covers himself under a veil for his own spiritual work. This veil, under which he prefers to remain hidden, is different from the veil that the 5 perfect masters draw on him while bringing him down in the human form. The veil that the avatar puts on himself can be removed by him at any time, and for any person or persons as he may desire, for the purposes of self-revelation or self-communication. The avatar does not take upon himself the karma of the world, nor does he become bound by it, but he takes upon himself the suffering of the world, which is the result of its karma. His suffering for the world is vicarious. It does not entail entanglement with the karma of the world, but humanity does not entail entanglement with the karma of the world. But humanity finds its redemption from its karma through his vicarious sufferings, example, illness, humiliation, accident, and the like. In his own way, the avatar unfailingly fulfills his incarnation by giving a spiritual push to his age.
This book, Beings, was dictated by Baba to answer questions that arose after the original publication of God Speaks. In God Speaks, Baba stated that before the avatar could come to be born on earth, the 5 perfect masters had to be here first. On the face of it, this statement from God Speaks and this explanation from Beings seem to be in conflict. But what Baba is referring to in the statement from God Speaks is that the 5 perfect masters had to be physically present on this planet Earth before the avatar could be born at first into this planet. What Baba is referring to, of course, is planetary spiritual evolution, which we won't get into long explanations about. It's a good example why context is very important when trying to understand Baba's words. So let's consider the physical universe, since it is the field upon which the whole game of creation is played in the gross world. The size of the physical universe is so astronomical that mathematical explanations are difficult to grasp. So I like this certain simile. Most astrophysicists today agree that there are at least as many stars in the universe as there are grains of sand on planet Earth. We were just a few of us there on the beach yesterday down here. You look up and down the coast. Then imagine all the beaches, all the sand in the world. How could you even conceive of this number? It's just mind-boggling. So some of those stars have solar systems, and Baba says that on some of the planets there are life forms that have evolved through certain stages of advancement. And Baba explained that on 18,000 of these planets, life forms have evolved completely. That is to say, there are human beings living on 18,000 of these planets in the universe. If we go back to the sand simile, 18,000 grains of sand can fit in your hand. So 18,000 grains of sand, if that represents all the planets where humans live, consider that of all the sand in the world, you can see that obviously the average space between planets where human beings reside is going to be astronomical also. Then Baba says something which to me is one of the most incredible things he's ever said, at least by statistic probability. he said that our planet, Earth, is the only planet in the universe where the functioning spiritual hierarchy of 7,000 led by the 5 perfect masters resides. The spiritually advanced. It is the planet where the 5 perfect masters bring the avatar down to be born. In other words, this is the spiritual archetype planet in the universe. That's incredible. The first reaction that came to my mind was, I bet you say that to all the planets. But we take Baba's word for this. So that means every soul that has been taking birth here, all 70 billion plus people now present on this planet, whether they are aware of it or not, are extremely fortunate. So what about a handful of us who have this obsession with keeping company with the Ancient One? It is like Baba used to say to those who were in his presence often, you people have no idea how fortunate you are. Now, scientists say generally that the age of this universe right now is only 14.5 billion years old. Yet Baba has said this has been going on for trillions upon trillions of years. The fact is that scientists will only be looking for the Big Bang origin, will only be able to see back as far as the re-emergence of creation after the last Mahapralaya, which is when the whole universe gets reabsorbed into an infinitely finite point. And as Baba puts it beautifully, something like, in one infinitely eternal moment in eternity, something like that. One infinite moment in eternity, only to re-emerge again as the creation through the own point. So the next question then is, when did human beings come to this planet? How did this planet is supposed to be somewhere over 4 billion years old. Sometime early in its life, another planet collided with it. And after some millions and millions of years, all of that matter reorganized into what is major Earth. And what was left of the collided planet became the moon. The reason I mention this is because Phyllis Frederick, some of you have met her, was a very psychic person. And she was close to Baba. She had the opportunity to be with Baba on the center in 1952 when he was there for the first time. Before the crowds came, she was there one evening with Baba and the women Mandali who were visiting. And it was a beautiful full moon night. They were outside enjoying the air and the skies. And she was looking at Baba and looking at the moon, and she said, "Baba, I feel as if I've been there before." And Baba said, "Yes, the moon was once in Earth." Just recycling. It's just all this recycling of matter that's going on. There has been no appreciable life form on this planet for, say, going back, begins about 700, 800 million years ago. We won't get into prehistoric history, but some of you may remember Irene Conybeare, who met Baba in the 40s. She was an author, so Baba gave her some latitude for asking these types of questions. She liked these kind of questions like the subject we're on today. And she had the opportunity to be with Baba at Marisad during his birthday time in 1953, and having a chance moment alone with Baba, she asked him, how old was Adam? And this is what Baba answered. If I answer that the first man came on this earth 84 million years ago, what would that mean to you? But the whole explanation will make you understand how the first man evolved, and how this first evolved man has been repeatedly, millions of times, appearing not only on this earth, but on millions of earths. And so he is ageless, timeless. But this all has to be explained properly. The book that I have personally written when I had just stopped speaking, and that I wrote in 1 year, and which now lies in the bank to be touched only when I order, explains this point clearly. It is important for the world and the scientists to know, and therefore I have explained about cycles, the position of the earth for realization, the earth dying and the simultaneous evolution of another earth, not on any other planet. When was the first human evolved? When was the first realized being? Whether the chicken or the egg came first. All has been written in detail in that book. That same year, Baba made a comment that, again, about planetary spiritual evolution, that these cycles were going on and on. He said, even now, a new earth is being prepared for when this earth is exhausted. He said, it is already 3/4 complete, and only 1/4 remains yet to be done. That God knows how long that would possibly take. But this is how it goes on and on. When Debbie and I were living in Abode, in the trust compound, I would occasionally go and sit with Erich during lunchtime when nobody else was there, and chit-chat a little bit with them, talk about something. I happened to be reading a book at the time that was interesting. It was Edgar Casey's Story of Jesus, which was really a summary of Edgar Casey's readings about different advents of the avatar and other things that were interesting. Edgar Casey dealt with this issue. Somebody had asked him about lifespans that were reported in the Bible of being hundreds of years, and he explained that yes, actually lifespans had been very long, but that they had gradually come down in this age to make it expedient for spiritual progress, to experience this cycle of birth and death more rapidly. So I was sitting with Erich and thinking about the math of it at the time. And I said, let's say we get an opportunity to have a cycle of birth, death, to birth again in 120 years on average, which would be very quick because you have suicide delays, you have delays because there are not suitable karmic connections with persons to be parents or family. There are times when they're just, the ages just aren't right for certain people to incarnate. But let's say that a human being could get a cycle of birth, death, birth in 120 years. And Baba said that the normal course of human reincarnation through evolution, through involution, is 8,400,000 lifetimes. That adds up to 1 billion years. Erich just chuckled and said, say at least 2 billion. Yes, and it could be much more than that. But that would be quick. So obviously, if that's the case, nobody could be only born on Earth and go through the whole cycle of human existence on one planet. We have had to have experiences in other planets. only natural. We know in our time, historically, of only 7 or so avatars. And Baba had put stress on them because there were people of different faiths that followed them. And to point out, Baba's purpose of this was to point out that this was the same ancient one, come again and again. So that essentially all people are connected because of that. But Baba told the women on the hill once that he was the last avatar in a cycle of 24. So 24, it's an interesting number because that adds up to, according to Baba's explanation of avatar cycle, about 25,000 years, which closely matches the time for what we call precession of the equinoxes, or precessional astronomical cycle. It means that on our planet, this planet faces a rotation in the solar system through the galaxy of 360 degrees that takes 25,700 and some years. About 1 degree every little less than 72 years, which would add up to 24 avatars. It's interesting, Baba also said that is the term of Indra, who is in charge of the realm of the angels. So there are many, we know, beginning with Zoroaster. Many of us have asked, I certainly asked the question of the Mandali in the early years, when did Zoroaster live? And without hesitation, they told me then, Baba said 10,000 years ago. Baba had, I remember the comment once Baba made in Bombay. One of the Parsi women had asked Baba when Zoroaster lived, and his comment to her then was, if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. Just left it at that. But the Mandali had told us that Zoroaster lived 10,000 years ago. And in 1954, Baba made a comment a hint that Ram was 7,000 years ago. So obviously, between Zoroaster and Ram, there had to be at least 2 advents that we don't know. Krishna was after Ram, but maybe not immediately. There could have been one more there. Baba did mention something about Abraham, but he left it very enigmatic, saying that it wouldn't be good to explain it for some reason. Now, Edgar Casey, according to him, he acknowledges Abraham, but says at that time, a personality known as Melchizedek was the avatar, actually. So that's a very murky, we don't know that history. And after that, the subsequent avatars we know, there have to be at least others that are not in known history. Whenever Baba did some type of particular function for his work, occasionally he would mention the names of the avatar. As an example, in the New Life at Sarnath, he had Mani write down the names of the known avatars. And those were the 6 before Baba that we know. We've noticed that this cycle of time for avatar advents is shorter once we come to Buddha. Buddha to Christ is shorter than usual. Christ to Muhammad is at least a century sooner. And we've discussed this subject from time to time, and the best the experts can come up with is that, well, Mayor Baba never liked math much anyway. But I personally think it's a different issue. I think these 3 previous advents were closely clustered in time so that there could be repercussions and engagement through the religions that followed these avatars to create this atmosphere for the present advent. I think it's very important for that. At least that's the hint we seem to get from history. because, as Baba said, this advent was most important. Baba used to say, this is the end, not now only the end of a cycle, but the end of a cycle of cycles. So we have all these words can become very confusing, and Baba occasionally did improve the nomenclature, the lexicon through the years, so that things have become more clarified. But this thing with cycles and then cycles of cycles, the little cycles, big cycles, avataric cycles, this is something Baba said in the final declaration at Mehrabad, and it gives us another hint of this time. This was given, of course, you know, September 30th, 1954. Bill was there. My next advent, after I drop this body, will be after 700 years, and that will mark the end and the beginning of a cycle of cycles. All cycles of time and illusion end and begin after 700 to 1400 years. There have been and will be millions and billions of such cycles in a cycle of cycles. Thus, there is no end to illusion, which always remains illusion. Abode once said one of the big cycles was like 12 billion years. Anyway, it's astronomical. Once I was in the hall and somebody asked Erich, Baba had said this was the last advent in a cycle of cycles. Erich, can you tell us what that really means? And Erich, who was tired of answering these types of questions by that point, said, well, every time he comes, he says something like this. And the reaction was the same. But I thought, why did Baba give so much emphasis to this then? There must be some significance to this end of a cycle of cycles business after billions and billions of years. It must mean something. So how to determine that, though, when we're here, sitting here, little dots in the gross world? Well, since the Earth is the archetypal planet, let's look at what happened on the Earth around the time the Avatar came and development of civilization and all those things. In the 19th century, things were developing, improving. Sanitation, a simple thing like the indoor toilet and sanitary plumbing, increased the lifespan of the average person of the world tremendously. A little thing like that. Development of medications and all of those things. If we look only at the period 1894 when Baba was born, the electric motor principle had been being developed later in the 19th century, and they had done a few prototypical projects of generation and electric motor driving certain things, but they were prototypes. The electric motor really came into production in the year 1894. And because of that being available, suddenly elevators were invented in 1894. Motion pictures were invented in 1894. A number of things you wouldn't think of. Even the simple zipper was invented around that time. A zipper, just imagine how much time that has saved humanity in the course of 100 and some years. So all of these things, what's happening is people are becoming less distracted with simple tasks, and so their attention turns to other things. Initially, it's leisure, fulfillment of desires, but once people get sick of that, they start looking deeper. That's the whole principle of the game. And Baba said when Paul Brunton came and met him in the cave at Mehrabad in 1930, all of this progress you see in technology, mass transportation, mass communication, is all due to my being here. It's time soon for the manifestation of the Christ of this age. That's why you see all of these things. What's the meaning of that? I mean, what it means for the average individual is that these old karmic problems are resolved like that so quickly. We have connections with people instantly around the world. And Baba himself had said these things, even in Guru Prasad. In later years in Guru Prasad, Baba said, "Now I will make the whole world very close." He told the women on the hill once in the 30s, walking up the hill, there were no trees, nothing there. He told them, "One day soon, there will be airplanes that will hold 400 people. And my lovers will come on these airplanes to come here and have my darshan." "No, Baba, how could it be?" And at Guru Prasad, I think it was, even then, he said, "Soon everybody will have their telephones like this and they'll just put them in their pocket. They can call anywhere in the world in an instant." "No, how could it be?" There it is. But the reason for all of this, of course, is to achieve rapid resolution of old karmic patterns that have been lingering for ages. Now everything is happening very quickly, because there's a great purpose behind it all. We're still in the superficial phases of all of this. I have more time. I think I'm going to just go right into what the next bit of this will be, and that concerns the avatar circle. Although I didn't bring the reading material, we'll just talk about it a little bit. You know that Baba has said that whenever the avatar comes, he has a circle of 122, and he works directly for the universe through his circle. Each of these circle members have a particular trait or quirk that is essential, that allows the avatar to work through them. So remember, essentially the universe, the description is nothing into nothing. But that means nothing opposing nothing creates an apparent something. It's like that from the origin of creation. Nothing opposing nothing creates an apparent something. In physics, the word is antagonism. But what we see as an example of the avatar circle, according to Baba's description, is that these people have a role. And remember, on an average, these roles are filled. Each one of these 122 roles is filled in an age that could last over 1,000 years. So there's a great transition period. It's a rare thing. It's not the typical role of a spiritual aspirant. But there were many types of people in the avatar circle. And depending upon the purpose for each one, depending upon the universal work in that age, each one of those persons takes that particular role. The most important persons in the avatar circle are always the two women appendages. Occasionally this issue comes up, why does the avatar always have to be a man? Well, the other question is, why does the avatar's two most important people always have to be women? It is because it is the nature of the gender to be the father of creation and the bearers of creation. The first most important role is that of the consort. None of these words are really fitting. She represents original Maya. How do you say this? The best description with all of this together can be understood through Baba's own words. I love you all for your sakes, but I love Mara for my sake. And this morning, Jim and I were discussing, I like to bring up the subject of dedication to God speaks, to the creation, the illusion that sustains reality. Actually, I think really in a way is a dedication to Mara. And second most important person is the sister, who represents infinite unconsciousness, Ishwar, the expression of creation working towards God through unconsciousness. This doesn't mean they were that. That means that through them, every soul in the universe can be accessed for the avatar's work. For example, Baba said Gustaji was his dark side. In 1927, when Baba told Gustaji that, he got depressed, that he was his dark side. Gustaji thought, oh, I was tortured by Sai Baba and Apasi Maharaj, and I had to serve you and Baba Jan and all these years, and I'm just the dark side? What does that mean? And Baba just laughed and said, you won't understand it, but it's very important. It means Gustaji himself was not a dark side. He was a very pleasant personality. He was very pure and exemplary. Quite spiritually advanced to the point where Baba once commented, actually Gustaji is of the seventh plane, but somehow he's still around, so I keep him with me. Baba said, through Gustaji, the darkness in every soul can be accessed by it. That's what this means, that there is an opposite in each of the circle members that allows the avatar to access humanity through all of those places. Check the time here quickly. There are 10 circles of 12 succeeding circles, Baba explained. There is always a person in each succeeding circle that is directly linked to one in the circle above, but the first circle is the most important tangible circle regarding the avatar's work. As Baba said, each of them represent a part of his body. Then there are these circle members connected to these preceding circle members, on and on it goes. And then there are people in the world who are connected to each of these. And in that way, through these inner links, the avatar works for all people in creation. I would rather not get into a new subject right now, so I'll just end by saying some of these subjects are important, simply regard them because of this. I look at the mind, the intellectual mind, as being a ball and chain for the heart to drag around. And some of these things help to lighten the load of the intellectual mind and make that ball and chain a bit lighter for us to drag around. And you know how the mind likes to feed on something? So why not let it feed on Baba's explanations to pass the time? Really, all of this is about simply one thing. It's just another way of us remembering him. So the next talk tomorrow may be in the afternoon, and if that is it, we may go to images instead of what was scheduled. If it's better at 4:30 to go right into photographic images and describing some of the stories and people there, we'll do that instead. We have a few minutes now. Does anybody have questions? Yes, Susan.
Peter, also in God Speaks it mentions is it just one world or many worlds with people that have 75%
Yes.
Is it many?
Well, that's another good example. That statement can also be misleading because part of the context of that statement is lost. Baba there mentioned that there were 2 other planets,
Right.
but he didn't mean there were only 2 other planets. That came from a remark he made. For an example, there are 2 other planets that are closely connected to Earth.
Oh,
And he said one was 75% intellect and one was almost pure intellect. He gave those as an example.
okay.
And although once people gain birth on Earth, they don't have to go to any other planet. It is not that they never do, because reaching Earth is the apex of planetary spiritual evolution. But what about the other persons they have connections with, and how do those other persons who have no opportunity to be born on an Earth ever get some link, some connection? So there is a back and forth that goes on. It's not that there is no back and forth ever. Baba had said himself that many billions of people from these other planets now were incarnating on Earth to have the opportunity to have a birth in the atmosphere of his advent. Whether they are aware of it or not, it doesn't matter. He made the remark once, do your best or do nothing at all. The population will increase. It has nothing to do with what's good for the planet and all of that business. It has to do with the advent and the great opportunity to be in that. We use Myrtle Beach as an example. You know, when Baba went there in 1952, he told everybody then, at the time there were 5,000 people living in the town of Myrtle Beach, which was, 8 miles away, and the center was just a nothing little place there. Baba said, you all will see this place will grow and grow because of my atmosphere here now. He said, the radius of my atmosphere goes out 17 miles. Edgar Casey, by the way, did mention, now I mentioned Edgar Casey because Baba liked him. He only talked in his sleep, so he didn't know what he was saying, so he couldn't call him a liar. But Baba liked him. Edgar Casey said the greatest city in Eastern America would rise on the coast of South Carolina, very near the border of North Carolina. It's Myrtle Beach. Okay, I'm just about done. I've got 30 seconds more, otherwise Jim Mara gets.
Jai Baba.
Thank you.